The first sound you hear is the echo of a gavel, sharp and final, cutting through the stale air of the courtroom. Judge Grayson's eyes pierce across the room, resting on a figure that seems too small, too young to hold the weight of what's about to unfold. They call him a teen, a kid, someone who doesn't belong in this arena of law and power. But beneath that unassuming frame, there's something different, something they didn't see coming. The spectators lean forward instinctively, their murmurs brushing against the high walls like restless wind. There's an unease in the room, thick and almost suffocating. You can feel it. A tension that doesn't just hover, it presses down, making every breath deliberate, every heartbeat audible. Jalen Dawson stands there, hands in his pockets, chin lifted, eyes calm but calculating, not a trace of fear, not a hint of doubt. Judge Grayson smirks. His lips twist in amusement and judgment simultaneously. "You think you're some kind of legal expert," he says, his voice carrying a dry, almost mocking tone. The room responds with laughter, a ripple of condescension aimed at the young black teen standing alone, assumed guilty before he even speaks. The bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor, they all lean into the joke, assuming this is just another performance by a kid in trouble. But the judge has already miscalculated. Jalen doesn't flinch. He doesn't laugh. He has spent years in preparation, not for this exact scenario, but for every possibility that the system could throw at him. While other kids memorized basketball stats, he memorized case law. While friends played video games, he rehearsed mock trials in his mind, debating imaginary cases with himself, sharpening his mind against a world that refuses to see beyond the surface. His mother, Denise Dawson, is in the gallery, her face stoic but alert, like a lighthouse in the stow. She taught him the hidden rules, how prosecutors manipulate, how judges bend, how defense attorneys sometimes fail. By 14, he had absorbed every nuance. By 19, he had become something the system cannot easily dismiss. And yet right now, he is underestimated. A young black teen in the eyes of a white judge, assumed naive, assumed weak, assumed beneath scrutiny. They think this will be quick, a mere formality. But Jalen knows the cracks in the facade, the hidden missteps in what appears to be an airtight case. He is poised, patient, waiting for the exact moment when everything will pivot. And when he moves, it will be precise, surgical, and impossible to ignore. The prosecutor rises, his polished shoes clicking against the floor, confidence radiating from every measured step. Mitchell Carrington believes he's already won. His suit is perfect, his tie immaculately knotted, every gesture rehearsed 100 times over. "Your Honor," he begins, voice smooth, deliberate. "The evidence is clear, the defendant was caught red-handed. There is no room for doubt." The jury nods, the spectators shift, the room tightens. On the surface it sounds convincing. A stolen vehicle, a chase, fingerprints. Simple, damning. Yet Jalen doesn't react. He watches, still, silent, letting the prosecutor paint the story they expect the jury to believe. He knows their pattern, their arrogance, their blind spots, and he knows the one thing they never anticipate, a mind prepared not to follow, but to dismantle. Judge Grayson taps his gavel lazily, a subtle signal that he's ready to move on. "Let's hear the defense," he mutters, expecting the usual nervous shuffle, the stammering arguments, the timid plea for leniency. But then Jalen's hand touches the arm of his assigned attorney, a public defender who barely meets anyone's expectations. With a quiet confidence, he leans forward, voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, I will be representing myself." A ripple moves through the room, whispers scatter like dry leaves in wind. The bailiff's eyebrows lift. Carrington's smirk falters, just slightly, a crack in his armor. Spectators lean forward. The gallery stops murmuring, sensing the shift. This is not a child defying authority. This is something far more dangerous to their assumptions. Intelligence wielded with precision, focused like a blade. Jalen takes a slow step forward, hands still in his pockets. Every movement measured, deliberate. The silence stretches, uncomfortable, forcing every eye in the room to acknowledge him, not as a teen, not as a black boy presumed guilty, but as someone who knows the rules better than those who enforce them. And in that silence, the tension thickens. The unspoken question hangs: who really holds the power here? He begins his strategy quietly, almost conversationally, addressing the court with a rhythm that unnerves the seasoned prosecutor. "You said Officer Daniel Ruiz personally witnessed me in the vehicle that night," he says, voice steady. "Correct?" Carrington confirms, already sensing the trap. Jalen nods, unhurried. "And this testimony is written in his report?" Another confirmation. Then he leans just slightly, eyes scanning the room, pausing on the jury. "I move to dismiss that testimony as evidence," he says softly, almost casually. The words slice through the courtroom like a scalpel. Grayson blinks, momentarily caught off guard. The gallery exhales collectively, realizing the courtroom is no longer following the expected script. This is more than a trial. This is a collision of perception and reality, bias and truth, authority and intellect. And in these walls, where decisions are often dictated by assumptions, Jalen is about to show them what happens when someone refuses to fit the mold they've cast for him. The courtroom holds its breath. Jalen steps forward, small but unyielding, like a lighthouse standing against a storm. Every eye follows him, every whisper hollow. "So, Your Honor," he begins, voice calm, precise. "If the officer was where he claimed to be, then the GPS data will confirm it. But if he wasn't..." His words hang in the air, heavy, deliberate, forcing the room to confront the possibility of a lie from someone sworn to uphold the law. Carrington shifts uncomfortably. His polished confidence begins to crack. He glances at Judge Grayson, hoping for intervention, for some signal to regain control. But Grayson is watching, intrigued, slightly unnerved. He senses that the narrative they all relied on, the neat, straightforward story, is beginning to unravel, and the unraveling is deliberate, surgical, orchestrated by a boy they underestimated. Jalen turns to the jury, locking eyes with each person one by one. "Finding my fingerprints on a car," he says slowly, "does not mean I stole it." A few jurors exchange glances. Some in the gallery murmur, but Jalen doesn't pause. He paints a scenario with careful precision, exposing assumptions that others never consider. A department store jacket, hands in pockets, a casual touch mistaken for guilt. Every example builds a wall of logic, a fortress that shields him from the false accusations while exposing the flaws in the prosecution's case. He continues, detailing exactly where he was the night the car was stolen, step by step, minute by minute, dismantling the narrative of flight and evasion. "I wasn't in the car," he says, voice firm. "I wasn't near it. I wasn't running from anything. The only thing tying me to this case is assumptions, bias disguised as procedure." The words cut through the courtroom, leaving no room for doubt, leaving only reflection, uncomfortable and raw. The racial undercurrent is undeniable. A black teen, standing accused in a system built on perception, assumed guilty before a single fact is confirmed. Jalen's calm precision exposes more than poor Polya. Sing. It exposes the implicit bias woven into every corner of the room. The audience senses it, the jury feels it, even Carrington can't ignore it. For the first time, the invisible walls of privilege, assumption, and expectation crack. Judge Grayson adjusts his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. He's forced to confront something he has ignored for years. Intelligence, preparation, and truth cannot be dismissed by age, appearance, or color. The courtroom's rhythm has shifted. Silence reigns, thick with tension. And in that silence, Jalen stands not as a defendant, not as a victim, but as a force. Calm, precise, undeniable. He is teaching them something they didn't realize they needed to learn. Justice is not just about evidence. It's about perspective, about seeing the unseen, about questioning what everyone assumes to be true. And right now, Everyone in that room is being forced to see what they didn't want to see. Jalen takes a measured breath, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make the room uncomfortable. Then he begins, voice steady, controlled, slicing through the tension. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence an official statement from the registered owner of the vehicle. The words drop like a stone in a still pond. Every eye in the room shifts toward him, spectators leaning forward instinctively, the gallery holding its collective breath. Carrington's jaw tightens. He knows this is coming, even before Jalen reveals it. The prosecutor is confident in his narrative, confident in the chain of assumptions that have stacked against a black teen. But he forgot one crucial rule. Never underestimate preparation. Never underestimate the mind of someone who has spent years studying every loophole, every weak point in the system. Judge Grayson raises a brow. The owner? He asks, voice cautious, sensing that the case is tilting in a direction he didn't expect. Jalen nods slowly. Yes, Mr. Raymond Whitaker provided a statement that was never submitted in the prosecution's filings. I believe I know why. The courtroom exhales, a ripple of tension and anticipation moving through every seat. Even the stenographer stops typing. Jalen pulls out the document, holding it with a calm authority. He reads aloud. I left my car running when I ran inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off, but it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid, and he was white. The silence that follows is deafening. Every person in the courtroom registers it differently. Shock, disbelief, unease, recognition. The assumptions that led to an arrest unravel in a single precise moment. He looks directly at the jury, unwavering. The arresting officers found a black teen in the vicinity and decided that was close enough, he continues, calm but firm. That is the reality of this case, not evidence, not truth. Assumption, bias, convenience. The words hit hard, forcing everyone to acknowledge a truth they had been comfortable ignoring. Carrington steps forward, attempting to regain control, voice shaking just slightly. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was caught in possession of the vehicle. Jalen shakes his head, voice cutting through like a scalpel. I wasn't. Blocks away. Walking home with friends after getting snacks. The only link is their failure to investigate and their reliance on biased assumptions. Judge Grayson exhales slowly, rubbing his temple. For the first time, the courtroom is quiet, not just silent, but tense, like the calm before a storm. Jalen's logic is inescapable. Every misstep, every bias, every corner-cutting tactic that assumed guilt without proof is laid bare. He is no longer just defending himself. He is exposing a system that too often punishes the innocent, especially those who look like him. And in this quiet, the spectators feel it, the jury feels it, even the judge, long accustomed to routine, feels it. For a moment, the truth is undeniable. Intelligence, preparation, and courage can cut through the weight of prejudice and assumption, and Jalen is living proof. Jalen steps closer, hands now free from his pockets. Every gesture deliberate. His gaze sweeps the courtroom, landing on each juror as if challenging them to think beyond what they've been told. Let's examine the so-called forensic evidence, he begins, voice calm but precise, slicing through the tension. Was the specialist who analyzed the fingerprints subpoenaed to testify? Grayson blinks, momentarily caught off guard. Carrington hesitates, searching his notes for a lifeline. No, he admits reluctantly. The courtroom feels the shift immediately, a subtle tremor in the foundation of the case, one that Jalen had predicted all along. The state relies on authority, not logic, on procedure, not truth. And now, under his scrutiny, that authority begins to crumble. He turns to the jury, voice steady, firm, and unflinching. The evidence they present to prove guilt was never tested under the scrutiny of cross-examination. No chance to question the chain of custody, no chance to challenge accuracy, and yet, here it is, offered as undeniable proof. Each word lands with weight, forcing the spectators to reconsider what they thought they knew. forcing them to confront the uncomfortable reality of assumptions masquerading as fact. He pauses, allowing the silence to stretch, the tension to sink into every corner of the room. Then he continues, deliberate and unyielding. Logic demands we question everything, not just the evidence, not just the testimony, but the process itself. How many times has bias dictated the outcome? How often has convenience overshadowed truth? The questions hang, echoing in the minds of everyone present. Carrington fidgets, adjusting his papers, attempting to maintain authority, but Jalen's composure is unshakable. The fingerprint on the steering wheel proves nothing, Jalen says, voice measured, cutting through the courtroom like a scalpel. I touched the car hours before the alleged crime, Unawad. It would become evidence against me, but assumptions are easier than truth, aren't they? He allows a brief glance at Grayson, who leans forward, visibly wrestling with the undeniable clarity of what's unfolding. The racial undertone is inescapable. A black teen, accused, judged, assumed guilty because he fit a narrative. Jalen doesn't just expose mistakes. He exposes the bias baked into every corner of the system. The jury feels it, the gallery feels it, Carrington feels it, even the judge cannot ignore it. Every assumption, every shortcut, every dismissal of his intelligence laid bare. And then, with quiet authority, he locks eyes with the jury. The system is not infallible, and right now you have a choice: follow assumptions or see the truth. Each word reverberates, forcing reflection. The courtroom is no longer just a stage for prosecution and defense. It is a mirror held up to a society that too often judges before it sees, condemns before it understands. Jalen's voice softens, yet each word hits harder than any shout. Let's talk about how this arrest really happened, he says, leaning slightly forward, commanding attention. The officers found a black teen in the area, saw an opportunity, and assumed guilt. That assumption became the foundation for everything that followed, not evidence, not truth, just a narrative written before the facts. The gallery is still, absorbing the weight of the revelation. The murmurs of earlier curiosity have vanished. Even Carrington's polished composure falters. The cracks in his confidence are now visible, shaking the authority he has relied upon for years. Grayson leans back, pinching the bridge of his nose, a man forced to confront a reality he had never expected in a routine courtroom. Jalen continues, pacing his argument like a strategist laying out a battlefield. Bias hides behind procedure. It masquerades as and those who assume they are impartial, who claim to follow the system blindly, often perpetuate injustice without even realizing it. This isn't just about me. This is about the countless others judged on assumptions, defined by the color of their skin, the shape of their voice, the neighborhood they come from. The jury shifts, glances exchanged, an unspoken acknowledgement forming. The spectators feel the undercurrent too, the subtle truth that systems are rarely neutral, that intelligence and preparation are often the only weapons against entrenched prejudice. And Jalen wields them effortlessly, a young black teen turning assumptions on their head with precision and clarity. He pauses, letting his gaze sweep over the room. I could have panicked. I could have deferred to the narrative others expected me to follow, but I studied, I prepared, I learned every loophole, every weakness, every fallacy, and tonight I use that knowledge not just to defend myself, but to expose the cracks that allow injustice to thrive. His voice holds a quiet intensity that draws everyone in, forcing them to reckon with truths they would rather avoid. Then, almost casually, he leans forward toward the jury and instructs them. Take a moment and recognize how easily we assign guilt, how assumptions masquerade as facts. And now I want you to do something. Comment below the phrase "truth over assumption" twice. Not for me, but for yourself. To acknowledge that seeing clearly is the first step to justice. The words land like a strike, stirring the audience in ways subtle but profound. This is no longer just a courtroom drama. It is a revelation, a psychological mirror reflecting both systemic failure and personal resilience. Every person in the room feels it. The air is thick with tension, awareness, and the uneasy realization that intelligence and courage can dismantle assumptions before evidence even takes the stand. And in that moment, Jalen is more than a defendant. He is a force, a teacher, a mirror held up to a system that too often judges. Too quickly, a young man proving that preparation, intellect, and courage can pierce through the deepest layers of bias. Jalen shifts his stance, every movement deliberate, like a chess master planning 10 moves ahead. "Now, let's examine the officer's testimony," he says, voice calm but cutting through the tension like a knife. Officer Ruiz claims he personally witnessed me behind the wheel, but the GPS logs, if reviewed, will tell a different story, one of absence, one of inaccuracy, one of assumption masquerading as observation. Carrington stiffens. He's caught off guard, caught in a narrative he thought he controlled. He shuffles papers, fumbles for authority, but the momentum has shifted irrevocably. The courtroom leans in, every juror, every spectator sensing the unraveling of the story they assumed was solid. Grayson adjusts his glasses, squinting at Jalen, realizing that this isn't just another defendant. This is a mind that has studied, prepared, and is now exposing every weakness in a system too often blind to its own flaws. Jalen continues, unwavering. The report claims visual confirmation, but confirmation without cross-reference, without verification, is nothing more than assumption. And assumptions, especially in a system steeped in bias, can condemn the innocent. His eyes sweep the room, daring anyone to challenge the clarity of his logic. The gallery murmurs, whispers spreading like ripples on a pond. Every word Jalen utters forces reflection, unease, a recognition of uncomfortable truths. He turns to the jury, voice steady, controlled, firm. The officer wasn't even on duty when the chase began. The timeline, if examined carefully, contradicts the narrative they want you to believe. The state presents a story built on convenience, not facts, and they rely on our willingness to accept it without question. His words are precise, calculated, leaving no room for denial. The tension is palpable. Carrington tries to interject, but Jalen cuts him off subtly, almost casually. "Your Honor, if the GPS data is verified, the assumption of observation collapses. The so-called evidence is now not just weak, it's misleading, and misleading evidence is worse than none at all." Judge Grayson leans back, rubbing his temple. The weight of the realization settles over him, heavy and undeniable. He's seen cases dismissed before, but never one where a defendant, a black teen, has dismantled the narrative so methodically, exposing bias, error, and assumption in real time. Jalen pauses, letting the silence stretch, letting the tension rise. Every eye is on him, every mind forced to reckon with the logic he presents, the truths he exposes. This is more than defense. This is illumination, a spotlight on systemic flaws that often go unnoticed, unchecked, unchallenged. And in that stillness, Jalen's presence dominates. Not because of size or age or appearance, but because intelligence, preparation, and courage can bend a room, shift a narrative, and expose truths that others would rather remain hidden. Jalen straightens, eyes sharp, voice steady as steel. "Now, let's address the fingerprint evidence," he begins, scanning the courtroom with deliberate precision. "Finding my prints on the steering wheel does not prove theft. It proves nothing more than a casual touch, an encounter devoid of intent. Logic demands we differentiate between contact and crime." Carrington shifts uncomfortably, flipping through his notes. The confidence that once filled the room is dissipating, replaced by an uneasy awareness that the narrative he controlled is slipping through his fingers. The gallery is silent, hanging on Jalen's every word, spectators and jurors alike sensing the weight of what's being revealed. Jalen continues, pacing the argument carefully, each sentence deliberate, each phrase designed to expose assumptions. "Consider this. If fingerprints alone dictated guilt, then every shopper, every passerby, every person who inadvertently touches property would be a criminal. Yet we know this isn't how law works, at least not when evidence is examined fairly, without bias. So why, in this case, is it treated differently? He steps closer to the jury, eyes locking on theirs with unwavering focus. The car was parked outside a convenience store hours before the alleged theft. I was inside with friends, unaware it would become evidence against me. I did not drive it. I did not steal from it. My only crime was being in proximity, a black teen in the wrong place at the wrong time. Assumptions filled the gaps and bias did the rest. The tension is almost unbearable. Carrington opens his mouth to argue, then hesitates, searching for a counterpoint that isn't there. Jalen lets the pause linger. He leans slightly forward, voice cutting through the stillness like a scalpel. The state relies on assumptions. They ignore context. They ignore evidence that contradicts their narrative, and they rely on your willingness to accept a story without scrutiny. But you, the jury, are not here to accept stories. You are here to examine truth. He gestures subtly toward Grayson. Your Honor, if the forensic specialist who processed the prints were present, I could cross-examine them. Challenge the methods, confirm the chain of custody, question accuracy. But that opportunity was denied. The prosecution uses evidence as a shield, not as a tool for justice. A ripple passes through the courtroom. Grayson leans back, thoughtful, realizing that every assumption, every shortcut, every bias that led to this moment is being exposed. And Jalen, small in stature but vast in intellect, is doing it methodically, unflinchingly, with the quiet authority of someone who has mastered the system he confronts. The room feels transformed. What began as a routine case now feels like a revelation, a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about bias, assumption, and the fragile nature of perceived authority. And in that moment, Jalen is no longer merely defending himself. He is demanding justice, clarity, and acknowledgement of truth that has long been ignored. Jalen reaches into his folder and pulls out the statement from the car's owner. The room leans in instinctively, the weight of anticipation thickening the air. Mr. Raymond Whitaker, he begins, voice calm but sharp. The registered owner of the vehicle provided a statement to police that was never submitted in the prosecution's filings. It reads, he pauses, letting the moment settle, then reads aloud. I left my car running when I ran inside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken off, but it wasn't the guy you arrested. I saw the kid and he was white. The courtroom gasps. A low murmur runs through the gallery, spectators exchanging looks of disbelief and shock. Even Carrington's expression tightens, a flash of panic crossing his face. This was the narrative he hadn't accounted for. The real suspect was not only innocent of the charges, they didn't even match the racial profile he assumed. Assumption, bias, and error are now laid bare for all to see. Jalen steps forward, gaze sweeping over the jury. This is not an accident. It is a failure of the system. A black teen found in proximity, presumed guilty. A white teen, the actual perpetrator, overlooked. How many other cases rely on similar assumptions? How many lives have been disrupted because no one bothered to verify the truth? The words hang heavy, like stones dropped into a still pond, rippling through the minds of everyone present. Grayson leans back, rubbing his temples, his gavel resting lightly on the desk. He had assumed this case was routine, simple, but now, confronted with the evidence and the methodical dismantling of every presumption, he sees clearly. The courtroom is no longer just a venue of law, it's a stage for truth to reveal itself. Jalen continues, turning back to the jury with unwavering authority. He arresting officers assumed proximity equaled guilt. They ignored witness statements. They ignored context. Bias guided their actions. And it almost succeeded. Almost. But now you, the jury, have seen the cracks. You have been given the truth to weigh against assumption. This is your responsibility, not mine, and it is heavy but necessary. The gallery is silent, every spectator processing the stark reality. The racial dynamics, the systemic assumptions, the failures of procedure, all laid bare in the words of a teen who refused to be defined by the narrative others had constructed. Then, quietly but firmly, Jalen addresses the audience beyond the courtroom. If you understand the weight of seeing clearly, I want you to comment below, twice. Truth over assumption. Not for me, but for yourself. To commit to clarity, to awareness, to seeing beyond what is easy to believe. In that charged silence, every juror, every spectator, every observer feels the gravity of the moment. Jalen is no longer just defending himself. He is exposing a system that punishes assumption over evidence and demanding that truth finally take its rightful place. Jalen straightens, the weight of the courtroom pressing in, yet his composure is absolute. Your Honor, he begins, voice precise, deliberate. The state's case rests entirely on assumptions, selective evidence, and misidentification. The real suspect was white, the witnesses confirm it, yet the narrative targeted me because of proximity and appearance. Carrington rises, attempting to interject, his rehearsed authority cracking. Objection! The defendant is… Jalen cuts him off smoothly, almost imperceptibly, a slight lift of the hand signaling control. Your Honor, please note, every objection to clarity only serves to obscure truth. The question is not my guilt or innocence, it is whether the prosecution built a case on fact, or on assumption. I present facts. I present evidence. I challenge assumptions. The gallery shifts, leaning forward. The tension is suffocating. Every juror senses the precariousness of what's unfolding. Grayson clears his throat, adjusting his glasses, face taut with focus. He has seen confident defendants before. None have commanded a room, dissected a case, and exposed bias with such meticulous precision. Jalen moves closer to the jury, voice unwavering. The fingerprint, the chase, the officer's testimony, all fall apart under scrutiny. No chain of custody verified, no cross-examination allowed, no corroboration beyond assumption. The real story has been hidden, intentionally or not, but hidden nonetheless. Justice cannot thrive in shadow. It demands illumination. Carrington falters, shuffling papers, his polished confidence crumbling. The gallery is silent now, every eye fixed on Jalen. Assumptions masquerade as facts and bias masquerades as law. Jalen continues, letting the words hang. How many others have been condemned for being in the wrong place at the wrong time? How many have suffered because truth was inconvenient or unexamined? The courtroom feels charged, alive with an almost electric awareness. Grayson's eyes narrow, the gavel heavy in his hand. He knows the verdict in this moment is about more than one teen. It is about the system itself, exposed, challenged, and forced to confront its own fallibility. Jalen's gaze sweeps over the jury once more. Your role is not passive. You do not merely witness truth, you validate it. You confront assumption. You recognize that bias, unchecked, can destroy lives. And now, faced with clarity, the decision is yours. The responsibility is yours. A hush settles. Even Carrington seems to realize the case is no longer under his control. Jalen stands quietly, yet every movement, every word resonates with authority, courage, and clarity. The courtroom is transformed from a battleground of accusation into a stage where systemic flaws and personal resilience collide, leaving all present with a profound awareness they cannot ignore. The courtroom holds its breath. Grayson leans forward, fingers drumming lightly on the gavel, eyes locked on Jalen. The silence is almost suffocating, broken only by the faint rustle of papers. Every person in the room feels the weight of this moment, how quickly assumptions can unravel, how power can shift, and how courage and intellect can expose the truth. Finally, Grayson speaks, voice measured, heavy with realization. Case dismissed. A beat of stunned silence. Then murmurs ripple through the gallery, growing into a wave of disbelief and quiet relief. Reporters scribble frantically, cameras flash, and spectators whisper in amazement. Carrington stands frozen, the carefully constructed facade of authority shattered. Jalen doesn't move immediately. He allows the moment to settle, the reality to sink in for everyone. Grayson's eyes remain on him, something unspoken passing between them, a recognition, perhaps even regret. He had expected routine, a predictable narrative, a simple victory. Instead, he has witnessed a masterful dismantling of assumptions, bias, and flawed procedure. "Mr. Dawson," he says finally, voice softer, almost reflective, "you should consider law school." Jalen smirks faintly, though his mind is already several steps ahead. He doesn't need to consider it. He was already on his way. Outside the courthouse, the air is thick with voices, cameras, and questions. Reporters swarm, trying to capture his reaction, to dissect his strategy, but Jalen ignores them. This isn't about spectacle. It's about a principle, a system, and a personal victory against unfair assumptions. His mother, Denise, waits at the bottom of the steps, arms crossed, face unreadable. For a long moment, she simply watches. Then she exhales, shaking her head. "Boy, you scared me half to death, Jay." Alan chuckles, scratching the back of his head. "Had to take a risk, Ma." She pulls him into a tight embrace. "You always were the stubborn one." The cameras flash incessantly, but Jalen's focus is elsewhere. Across the street, Judge Grayson watches, his posture different now, arrogance replaced by reflection. He hadn't expected this case to demand more than routine. But now, he knows he will remember it forever. Jalen has done something few ever manage. He forced the system to confront itself, and it blinked first. Jalen knows this case is not unique. Countless others are judged not on evidence, but on bias, shortcuts, and assumption. He has the knowledge to fight back, but he wonders, what about those who don't? This isn't just about him, it's about everyone. The next time, he won't be the defendant, he'll be the attorney. And when that day comes, he won't be alone. If this story makes you pause, reflect, or question even for a second, comment below twice. Truth over assumption. Commit to clarity, to awareness, to seeing beyond what's easy to believe. The courthouse grows quiet as the crowd disperses, but the weight of the moment lingers like a shadow. Jalen walks slowly, deliberately, each step a reminder of how courage and knowledge can bend a system built on assumption. Every eye that watched him feels a shift inside, a subtle awareness that truth is fragile, easily hidden, and often ignored, but never beyond reach if confronted with clarity. Outside, the sun cuts through the haze of the city, yet the glare doesn't distract from what has been revealed. Jalen's mind races, not with triumph, but with reflection. How many others have been wronged because no one paused to question the narrative? How many lives have been altered, crushed, or erased because bias and convenience outweighed justice? He knows now, intelligence alone isn't enough. Awareness, courage, and relentless scrutiny are the tools that carve paths through injustice. His mother catches up, voice soft but firm. "You changed something today, Jalen, not just for yourself, but for everyone who watches, everyone who learns, everyone who realizes they can question the system too." He nods, knowing the truth in her words. This victory is symbolic. It is a call to recognize the subtle yet devastating power of prejudice and the quiet strength required to confront it. Across the street, Judge Grayson watches, distant yet introspective. The dismissal was more than a legal ruling. It was a mirror reflecting bias, assumption, and flawed authority. He had assumed control, only to learn that justice, when examined without fear, can no longer be dictated by shortcuts or personal judgment. The system will continue, but those who understand its weaknesses can begin to reshape it. Jalen glances at the bustling streets, the reporters fading behind him. He doesn't seek recognition, he seeks impact. The lesson is larger than one case, one courtroom, one teenager. It is a challenge to all who witness, all who listen, all who choose awareness over ignorance. He whispers to himself, a quiet mantra of resilience. The truth is stronger than assumption, patience stronger than fear, and preparation stronger than doubt. And as he walks away, leaving the courthouse behind, Every viewer is left with a question. Will you remain a witness to injustice, or will you confront it armed with insight and courage? The answers are yours to decide, the responsibility yours to bear. Remember, comment twice. Truth over assumption. Let it anchor your awareness, transform your perspective, and commit you to seeing beyond the surface of every narrative. Because the world doesn't change for those who wait, it changes for those who act. The story ends, but its echoes linger. Unsettling, enlightening, impossible to ignore.